Welcome back to Anything You Want, the channel where emotion, truth, and the pulse of celebrity life collide. If you love deep stories, unexpected turns, and human truths hidden beneath glamour, make sure to subscribe, hit that join button to support our work, and never miss the stories that move the entire nation. Today, we step into a storm that no one saw coming, a storm born not from scandal or romance, but from silence. A silence that echoed louder than words, a choice that fractured the internet, and a moment that once again placed Elçin Sangu and Barış Arduç under the most unrelenting light of all, public judgment. It began on a gray Istanbul morning, the kind where grief hangs in the air like mist. Cameras lined the ancient streets near an old mosque where a woman of 92 was being carried to her final rest. She was Barış Arduç's grandmother, a woman who had lived between Turkey and Italy, a bridge of cultures, kindness, and family warmth. Her passing was meant to be a private farewell, a day of quiet tears. But fate, and perhaps our collective fascination with the famous, had other plans. Because when the ceremony began, someone noticed an absence. Not just any absence, the absence of Elçin Sangu, the woman whose name had once been written beside Barış's in every headline and whose presence had once defined the glow of Turkish television's golden couple. At first, it was just a murmur among those gathered, "Where is Elçin?" Yet by the time the final prayers were whispered, that question had already crossed into living rooms, comment sections, and breaking news banners. Barış stood at the front of the mosque, his posture steady but his eyes red with fatigue. Every movement, the way he held the coffin, the way his mother, Gülden Osman, clung to her husband's arm, was a portrait of raw humanity. He had not asked for pity, but when the cameras captured his trembling shoulders, sympathy spread like wildfire. Then came the comparisons, the conclusions, the fury. Why hadn't Elçin come? Was it pride, pain, or peace she was protecting? When the internet demands an explanation, even silence becomes an answer. And so, hours later, she gave the world what it didn't expect, a black post, a red carnation resting alone in darkness. No words, no captions, no excuses. Just a flower, a symbol of mourning, love, and restraint. That single image broke the internet. Half of the fans hailed it as poetic respect. Grief doesn't need an audience, they said. The other half called it cold, a line drawn too sharply between history and heart. Those who knew them both, truly knew them, say that Elçin and Barış's story was always made of intensity, deep affection, unspoken tensions, and a connection that refused to fade even after it ended. The grandmother had adored Elçin. During the golden years of their relationship, summers were shared in seaside towns, mornings filled with quiet breakfasts and laughter carried over video calls. So when she passed, the expectation of a farewell wasn't just from fans, it was from memory itself. Elçin's close friends, however, offered a gentler explanation. They spoke of a woman trying to rebuild her peace after a breakup that the public never truly let die. She didn't want the cameras to steal that day from the family, they said. Her love was real, but her presence would have turned mourning into spectacle. For them, her silence wasn't coldness, it was protection. At the funeral, amid the chaos of cameras and whispers, someone close to Barış reportedly heard him say that a single message, even just a brief note, would have meant the world. Sometimes, he murmured, humanity speaks loudest in the smallest gestures. That line, too intimate to be public, somehow found its way to the press. Suddenly, the tide shifted. Sympathy wrapped itself around him, while scrutiny fell heavier on her. Then, as the family stepped outside, Gülden Osman, her face pale with exhaustion, spoke softly to a journalist. "On days like this," she said, "pride should sleep." A gesture would have healed what words could not. She didn't say Elçin's name. She didn't have to. Within minutes, social media ignited. "She's not part of the family anymore," some wrote. "But humanity doesn't end with marriage," others replied. She wanted to avoid chaos. But she could have stood in the back, quietly, respectfully. Every sentence was a spark. The debate roared like fire through forums, cafes, and newsrooms. Soon, Italian media joined the frenzy. Articles appeared referencing the grandmother's years by the Mediterranean, recalling how Elçin had visited her in coastal villages. European tabloids painted her absence like the twist in a tragic romance film, cinematic, shocking, symbolic. Then, as if waiting for the moment to strike, another name slipped back into the conversation: Sara Bluma, the Italian model once rumored to have been part of the rift between Elçin and Baris. Sara hadn't appeared at the funeral, but gossip sites couldn't resist weaving theories. Some suggested that Elçin's absence was an unspoken gesture, a way of stepping aside for reconciliation to bloom between Baris and Sara. It was pure speculation, yet, like smoke in the wind, it spread too quickly to contain. Those close to Elçin were furious. "She cried when she heard," one friend said. "She lit a candle in her home. She sent flowers quietly, without announcement. She wanted the day to be about the grandmother, not about her." And perhaps that's the heart of it, the idea that sometimes, not showing up is the truest form of respect. But where does duty end and self-care begin? Should a public figure owe gestures to a public that never stops watching? These are the questions that filled living rooms and message boards across Turkey. One side saw strength in her restraint. The other saw coldness disguised as dignity. And in the middle of it all stood two people who once loved each other deeply, now bound not by romance, but by the unrelenting gaze of millions. Baris, the actor of quiet power, bearing his grief in public, his every tear dissected for meaning. Elçin, the artist of silence, expressing emotion through symbols, through stillness, through the refusal to perform pain for the crowd. Together, even apart, they form a kind of poetry, the kind that breaks the internet and haunts the heart. If you're still watching, you're part of a community that looks beyond gossip, you seek the story behind the story. So don't forget to like this video, subscribe to anything you want, and if you want to go even deeper with us, hit that join button to support our growing family. Now, back to the storm that changed how a nation talks about love, duty, and dignity. Somewhere at the center of all this noise is the memory of a 92-year-old woman who had crossed borders and languages with grace. Those who knew her say she would have chosen peace over spectacle, understanding over conflict. Perhaps she would have smiled at all the noise and whispered, "This too shall pass." Because the truth is, grief belongs to no one but those who feel it. Maybe Elçin's silence was her prayer. Maybe Baris's tears were his. And maybe the rest of us, glued to our screens, were just trying to find pieces of our own heartbreak in their story. At Anything You Want, we don't just tell stories, we explore the fragile line between fame and feeling, between what the world expects and what the heart can bear. What do you think? Was Elçin right to stay away? Should love's history always demand a final goodbye, no matter the pain? Tell us below in the comments, we read every one. And before you go, remember. Tap like if this story made you think. Hit subscribe to keep walking this road of truth and emotion with us. And if you want to help us keep uncovering the stories that others shy away from, press that join button and become part of our Anything You Want family. Because in the end, behind every headline, there's a heartbeat, and that's what we'll always listen for.